Malcolm Garvey, Huey. Study Malcolm Garvey, Huey. Their life was like a movie. Study Malcolm Garvey, Huey. Malcolm Garvey, Huey. Malcolm Garvey, Huey. Their life was like a movie. I die, I organize. Everything I do's revolutionize. I build what's good for the whole damn hood. Study G's like these, really think you should. I study Malcolm Garvey, Huey. Malcolm Garvey, Huey. Master Cody with the Uzi. Listening to Fela Kuti. I'm Ogun with the machete. Especially if it's Delhi. Got the Santos for the Hexy to protect me, so respect me. This is heavy, legendary, revolutionary. My wifey, she resurrect me when they thought they had me buried. Took me out the cemetery.
As long as you think we should get Mississippi straightened out before we worry about Congo, you'll never get Mississippi straightened out. Malcolm X said, as long as you think we should get Mississippi straightened out before we worry about the Congo, you'll never get Mississippi straightened out. He said this during his speech in the ballroom in his 1964 speech at New York City. He said, we all have to realize what part our struggle has all over the world. I'm gonna say, I picked it up. We have to realize what part our struggle has in all over the world struggle. Secondly, we need allies. And as long as you and I think we can get allies from the Bronx or allies, you know, from the Grand Concourse, I mean, when you don't live, you'll never be able to understand what it means to have allies. You thinking small, think big. Thinking small, think big. Hey, when Donald Trump was able to push all this demonization behind, you know what I'm saying, immigrants, but as soon as them white Afrikaners needed some help, all this shit he was talking about immigrants went out the way because he understand he need allies. We didn't let these white folks convince us that we in this shit by ourselves. Can pull up more receipts of people that's been putting their blood, sweat, and tears towards independence of black people, acknowledging that what's happening in Palestine has a direct link to what's happening to them. Nelson Mandela grandson right now was the last person to get released by Palestine. And y'all want to know what Nelson Mandela said about Palestine? Y'all do know that South Africa apartheid 1948 started the same year of Israel, 1948. Y'all know how the South African apartheid was ended? Because y'all swept and down, we can't do nothing. It's what happened. I'm going to teach y'all that history lesson. There started to be a lot of pressure towards South Africa and South African companies. American citizens started to boycott South African companies. American officials started being critical of South Africa. As a result, to Americans, uniquely the citizens, talking shit and criticizing the foreign government of South Africa, it encouraged our government to disinvest from South Africa, and it helped bring down the apartheid. When it's Black History Month and y'all start talking about y'all favorite, you know what I'm saying, civil rights leaders, do y'all ever pay attention to what they said about war?
We knew that my grandfather on my mom and my dad's side, they were both Black Seminoles, so we didn't know anything else. That's what we're working with, my cousins and I, on, you know, teaching the history and preserving, you know, the traditions.
Thy name, thy kingdom come, thy will be done. Allah will be thy name.
One of our cousins, Bertha Benson, had did a YouTube video for Sista, and it was talking about how the Seminole language was a lost language. And I didn't want that language to be lost, because that's part of my history, that's part of my family. So that's when I started to research more and learn about my history.
We don't hear as much about the Southern Underground Railroad as we hear about the Underground Railroad that went north. However, as early as the 1600s, there was a Southern Underground Railroad. And in this Southern Underground Railroad, Africans escaping enslavement from South Carolina came to the land of refuge, which was Florida. As early as 1693, the King of Spain issued an edict that said that all Africans who escaped slavery and came to Florida could be free. And so Florida became the land of refuge. And 1763, with the Treaty of Paris, when Spain ceded Florida to the British, then the Spanish took those Africans who were living there and they went to Matanzas, Cuba. Now, because Florida had this reputation as being a land of refuge, that did not stop Africans from coming to Florida.
I don't feel like I would have followed Harriet Tubman. Why? Simply because, for one, I don't know your conversion rate.
What do you mean you wouldn't join Harriet Tubman? She would have had to haggle with you for your freedom? It's not enough that she risked her life to come back and try to save you, but now she needs to go over conversion rates and percentages and market herself so that you can give her the privilege of escorting you to freedom? Then he went on to say that he'd just do his job, and in doing so would avoid being beat. My brother in Christ, the beatings come with the enslavement. You can't separate the two. You act like the plantation is ran like a modern Fortune 500 company. You're acting like you can dodge the beatings like an office worker can dodge a write-up. It doesn't work like that. You sound like the type to try to work your way up the plantation ladder. You want to be a mid-level manager so bad. You wouldn't even make it into the house. You're not even light-skinned. I would have been had my tattered shirts and overalls packed and ready to go. I'm taking my chances.
Compatriotes, Practitioner yo. Yon peuple qui pa konnen kote l soti, pa konnen tout rêve que l pa même osé imaginer. Nou pa n'importe peuple. L'école yo pa di nou tout peuple que nous y a. Nous sortis loin. Nous sortis dans Guinée, c'est vrai. Mais son paquet de nations qui viennent et qui composaient peuple haïtien que nous y est aujourd'hui. Nous traversons l'Atlantique dans quel bateau négrier. Il y a des gens qui disent ah, on va tourner encore avec l'histoire. Mais ce n'est pas comme l'histoire, on ne pas compte qui a souillé. Mais je dis, nous sortis loin, nous sommes peuple du feu. Nous sommes peuple dignité, nous sommes peuple souverain. Nous sommes premier pays qui naît de gros gourmet qui était fait pour que les ancêtres nous étaient capables de prendre indépendance. C'est pour voir ça fait dans le monde entier. Le premier empire nègre des Amériques. Et empereur nous relé Jacques, empereur premier d'Haïti. Haïti, c'est maman liberté. Nous-mêmes, nous sommes descendants, femmes à garçons vaillants, moi les marrons libertaires, qui étaient levés, campés, pour te dire non. Non à un système qui était là depuis que le monde existait, et qui, première fois, déclarait en nation d'hommes noirs, de femmes noires, et aussi des mondes mélangés, parce que nous tous, nous sommes des mélangés. Nous tous, c'est des mondes qui viennent déclarer libres. Je dis, nous sommes descendants des marrons libertaires. Nous sommes peuple vaillant, nous sommes peuple qui jambe. Nous sommes petits de rois et reines d'Afrique. Nous sommes paquet à faire dans le monde. C'est ça nous y est jusqu'à aujourd'hui, malgré ça, nous vivons aujourd'hui. Nous vivons dans un pays qui pouvait, une fois de plus, que nous avons force pour nous gommer, mais nous avons un pile courage pour nous supporter ça, la misère, la pauvreté. Pas seulement misère côté pas qu'à manger, mais misère côté que nous en prison dans notre propre pays. Nous.
Ọba Ìfárótìmí Fálọba ọba ìdíwọ̀ àgbáyé ti orísun ilẹ̀ Yorùbá Ilé-Ifẹ̀ ibi tí ẹ wà ibẹ̀ là ń pè Ilé-Ifẹ̀ gan ibi tí a kọ́kọ́ dá níbi tá a wà ibi tí odò àrọ̀ sí gan ibi tí a wà ibi tí ìjọba ti bẹ̀rẹ̀ náà níbi tá a wà ibi ìjọba tá ń lò ní pátá ibi tí bẹ̀rẹ̀ náà rí gbogbo àwọn tí ń jọ wáyàn náà ń ṣèdájọ́ ọ̀fẹ́ ńgbà yẹn àtọ̀bàtálá o àtọ̀rànfẹ́ o àtògún o àtọ̀balúayé o àti gbogbo inú ilé ìná kọ́kọ́ gbé ilé wọn wà níbi tá a kámẹ́rà sọ̀rọ̀ yẹn ẹ bá wá ń sọ̀rọ̀ nípa bàbá Ọọ̀ni òun ní àgbà gbogbo àwọn tọ́lọ tẹ́yà lọ́rùn tán lọ bulẹ̀ lóko tán bulẹ̀ káàkiri lọ yẹn ní ọgbà àsúre fún pé ìwọ tó wà lẹ́sẹ̀ mi báyìí o ìwọ nígbà máa pé sínú ọ̀la àti inú pòpó àtọ̀nàná abọ́wókùn ọbárada gbogbo àtọ́lọ yẹn pátá wọn bá máa forí balẹ̀ fún kò sọ bá kan tó máa jẹ nílẹ̀ Yorùbá lónìí tàbí oko ìkùn tẹ̀ nífẹ̀ẹ́ kó máa ọ ni bí bàbá wọn ní jẹ́ àgbà gbogbo wọn nìyí ló gbàdé dáadáa jù mọ́ wọn lọ́dọ̀ ẹlẹ́ṣẹ̀ bàbá rẹ̀.
The Yoruba creation myth provides a unique understanding of the universe's origin. According to this mythology, the universe was born out of chaos and water with the help of a deity named Oduduwa, who descended from heaven with a chain, a snail shell filled with sand, a white hen, chameleon, and fruit seeds. The Yoruba creation myth traces its root back to the ancient Yoruba people of West Africa. This lore, deeply entrenched in oral tradition, has been passed down through generations, shaping and being shaped by cultural, social, and environmental factors over time. The myth serves as a potent source of historical and spiritual knowledge for the Yoruba people, providing insights into their origin and evolution. Shrines dedicated to this old Aram fair further underscore the significance of this creation myth within the community. Despite its age-old nature, the narrative continues to hold relevance today, reflecting not just an ancient worldview but also timeless human themes. As usual, we at Nkeyin TV paid a visit to the Oduduwa house in Ile-Ife and the first palace in creation according to the Yoruba belief to unravel the true Yoruba story as regards creation of the universe.
Orúkọ mi ni Ọba Ìfárótìmí Fálọba Ọba Diwa Àgbáyé ti orísun ilẹ̀ Yorùbá Ilé-Ifẹ̀. A dúpẹ́ lọ́wọ́ Ọlọ́run. Ibi tí ẹ wà ibẹ̀ là ń pè Ilé-Ifẹ̀ gan. Ibi tí a kọ́kọ́ dá níbi tí a wà. Ibi tí odò àrọ́ọ̀sì gan. Ibi tí a wà. Ìgbà tí odò àmà wa dálé ayé. Olódùmarè ló rán wa láti òde ọ̀run. Gbogbo ibi tí a wà omi ní gbogbo ẹ̀. Láyé àtijọ́. Ìgbà tó máa rán wa, ó fún láwọn nǹkan kan láti wá dálé ayé. Ó fún ní àtẹ̀pẹ́. Àtẹ̀pẹ́ yẹn là ń pè nílẹ̀ báyìí. Ó fún ní adìẹ ẹlẹ́sẹ̀ márùn-ún. Ó fún ní ọ̀gà táwọn olóyìnbó ń pè ní chameleon. Ó tún fún láwọn kankan sínú àpò àtògbé kọ́rùn. Àwọn kan yẹn là ń jẹ lé ní táwọn lẹ́rẹ̀ẹ́rẹ́ táwọn àti gbó àti èrè àti ráìsì àti gbogbo tá ń jẹ. Àwọn nǹkan tó fọ́n káàkiri yẹn. Tó gbà iṣẹ́ àwọn yẹn ni omi nìkan làwọn máa mu. Ìgbà tó ń bọ̀ láti òde ọ̀run. Ìgbà tó di agbede méjì ayé àti ọ̀run. Ó mú yẹ̀pẹ̀ yẹn ó bù sójú omi. Ó má dé ẹlẹ́sẹ̀ márùn-ún ó fi lé lórí. Adìẹ bẹ́ẹ̀ sì máa tán wọn yẹ̀pẹ̀ yẹn. Tí ìbá ṣe agbára Olúwa ni. Tábà bí ẹ̀kọ́ bí omi ní ìsìn máa lọ́sàlẹ̀ omi ni. Àmọ́ ń gbà tí àṣẹ Olódùmarè tó wà ń bẹ̀ ó wà lókè. Wọ́n fàdí yẹn lé lórí olóbìrẹ̀ sí tálẹ̀. Ń tálẹ̀ títí tí wulẹ̀ fẹ́ dáadáa. Wá wò títí wá mú chameleon ọ̀gá. Òfin òun lọ kọ́kọ́ ní wò. Ó yí o. Ó yí o, ó yí o, ó yí o. Tẹ́ bá ń wúrẹ́ ní ìsìn yẹn lọ́sí wà lẹ́sẹ̀ náà ní ìsìn. Lórí pọ́ fi ẹ̀wọ̀n yẹn rọ̀ sórí ilẹ̀ Oòduà. Ìgbà tọ́rọ̀ sí ibi tán ilẹ̀ bẹ́ẹ̀ sì fẹ́ lọ. Tí ó lópin rárá mọ́. Nǹkan tó wà ní àpò wa rẹ̀ fọ́n káàkiri. Fọ́n sílẹ̀ lọ. Gbogbo tó fọ́n káàkiri là ń wò lẹ̀ àti gbó àti jíjẹ àti mímu gbogbo tá ń jẹ lónìí. Tí ò bá sí nǹkan tó fọ́n kiri yẹn ni omi náà làbá máa mu. Ọ̀tọ̀ Olódùmarè lọ. Olódùmarè o. Iṣẹ́ tó wọn náà wọ́n ti parí ẹ̀. Olódùmarè wa ní kan tó ń padà sílé ayé yìí. Àti àwọn kan tó jọ wà lọ́hùn. Àtàgbọ́n ní ìbú ní o. Àtọ́bàtálá ní o. Àti gbogbo máa padà síbí. Kan ló máa sílé ayé bí. Bọ́ ṣe wà nílé ayé tá ń sílé ayé ọ̀nà nìyẹn. Títí. Ìgbà tí iṣẹ́ ń gbẹ̀ náà lè bí. Nígbà tí Ilé-Ifẹ̀ dáadáa tá ń pè ní Ilé-Ifẹ̀. Ilé Nàìjíríà tá ń pè ní Ilé-Ifẹ̀. Ibi tí ìjọba ti bẹ̀rẹ̀ náà níbi tá a wà. Ìjọba tá ń lò ní pátá ibi tí bẹ̀rẹ̀ náà rí. Nígbà tá ń ṣe tán tá ń ṣe gbó rẹ̀ olóko wọ́n bẹ̀rẹ̀ sí ìdájọ́ Ilé-Ifẹ̀ ń bẹ̀. Gbogbo àwọn tí ń jọ wáyà náà ń ṣèdájọ́ ọ̀fẹ́ ńgbà yẹn àtọ̀bàtálá o àtọ̀rànfẹ́ o àtògún o àtọ̀balóayé o àti gbogbo inú ilé ìná kọ́kọ́ gbé ilé wọn mọ àánú bí tá a kámẹ́rà sọ̀rọ̀ yẹn. Lẹ́nu kọ̀ọ̀kan wọn kọ́ ilé kọ̀ọ̀kan sí ìgbà àtijọ́ tí wọ́n ń gbé ibẹ̀ la kámẹ́rà ni. Nígbà tó gbé àwa nílẹ̀ wò títí tí ó náà wò pé òun fẹ́ ròpinlẹ̀ ṣe rí mọ́. Gbèdébè kan pàgọ́ sí bàbá ẹ̀ sì ní gbé títí nígbà tó pẹ́ nìyẹn bẹ̀rẹ̀ sí bá ń bẹ̀ àti bí iṣẹ́ àtẹ́lẹ̀ ṣe wọ́n bẹ̀rẹ̀ sí bá ń bẹ̀ ìyẹn bẹ̀rẹ̀ sí bá ń bẹ̀ òun tó tásìkò òun láti wá sílé gbẹ̀mọ́ adélé wọn ní mọ̀ wọ́pọ̀ mọ́ bí tẹ́yìn bá lè tó bá ti lo bí 200 years ń bẹ̀ ó lo sẹ́ńtírì mẹ́kò tó padà sílé tí a kò ti lágbára jù gbẹ̀mọ́ adé ọ̀pọ̀lọpọ̀ mọ́ ibi tó ti kú lọ yẹn gangan ẹ wò pé kí làwọn lè ṣe ń bẹ̀ ó dàbí ibi tá a wà yìí náà ni tí tẹ bá débẹ̀ ẹ máa bá lé Ògún ẹ máa bá lé Èṣù ẹ máa bá lé gbogbo ẹ̀ ń bẹ̀ ẹ wò pé kí làwọn lè fi bí ìṣe káwọn kó tóbi tó ti kú èṣe káwọn sọ bẹ ìṣe káwọn sọ bẹ di ilé àpéwò táwọn olóyìnbó ń pè ní tourism bẹ́ẹ̀ fún bẹ́ẹ̀ ṣe lórí ìtàn sọ́rí tourism nìyẹn bẹ́ẹ̀ lọ ń pé wọ́n là ń pè ní mọ́kà lónìí yẹn bàtọ́ bá dé bóde bá ní kọ́ mọ́kà o kọ́ mọ́rò o mọ́sàn tó bí ẹ̀ bá rí ń bẹ́ẹ̀ o wọ́n fi yẹn pé ọ̀pọ̀lọpọ̀ èrò wá torí ẹni àkọ́jẹ́ mùsùlùmí ni káyọ̀ kọ́lá wo Èṣù kọ́lá wo Ṣàngó kọ́lá wo bẹ̀ kan ṣé afẹ́ lọ bẹ̀ àmọ́ ìgbà tó ti bíra mọ̀jẹ̀ mọ́ pé ibi tó ń lọ gbọ́dọ̀ ká o gbọ́dọ̀ ro o gbọ́dọ̀ sọ tó bí ẹ̀ rí o ẹnikẹ́ni tó bá ti fẹ́ wọ bẹ̀ ìdí tí mọ́kà fi dé nìyẹn pátá àwọn máa ní òbí àkọ́mfọ̀n mọ́kà odò àti mọ́kà wà rárá o ibi ni Oòduà àti ìlọ ẹ̀wọ̀n lọ fúrọ̀ dé bí wọn ní lámúlò bí Oòduà lámúlò kọ́ ló bí Oòduà o àwa tá a wà bí àmọ́ bàbá àmọ́ ìyá ẹ̀ Olódùmarè ló lè mọ ní tó bí látọ̀hún kó ránṣẹ́ wá sílé ayé ibi tá a dúró sí ibà tí ń ṣèjọba a máa dájọ́ ni o a máa ṣàdúrà fún yẹn ni o a máa sun kóhun ni o ibi ilé àdúrà wà náà níbi tá a wà yìí tẹ́lẹ̀ tí ń ṣèjọba lọ títí tí Oòduà tún fi dàgbà ó tún fi agbára fún àìtọ́ fún bọ́lẹ̀ tó wáyé kó bá jẹ́ kó Oòduà bá kú ni àfihàn ní gbogbo tá a dúró sí lọ báyìí gbogbo ilé wa níbi tẹ́ ń wè àmọ́ ìgbà tí Oòduà kò tẹ́ pé agbára lọ fi bọ́lẹ̀ ọba kan òkú ọba kan ò jẹ́ lọ́jọ́ ká ní ààfin mìíràn ààfin kan táwa máa lò níbi tá a wà yìí ibẹ̀ ni èmi jẹ́ olùsí báyìí ọba di àfi ní ṣòkò lé láti máa ṣe gbogbo tó bá ń lọ ń bẹ̀ ìbílẹ̀ Ifẹ̀ ti ṣe rí nìyẹn ibi tí Oòduà rọ́ọ̀ṣì yẹn inú nílò nílé Oòduà yẹn wà ẹ̀mọ́tò fẹ́rẹ̀ ọgbọ́n ìgbà yẹn wà ń bẹ̀ àmọ́ obìnrin lè débẹ̀ ju àwa tí a wà ní ìdí ẹ̀ lọ mo sì rí jẹ́lẹ́ nìyẹn ẹ bá wá ń sọ̀rọ̀ nípa bàbá Ọọ̀ni òun ní àgbà gbogbo àwọn tọ́lọ tẹ́lẹ̀ lọ́rùn tẹ́lẹ̀ ọ̀bùlẹ̀ lókùnkùn tẹ́ ń búlẹ̀ káàkiri lọ yẹn ní Oòduà àsúre fún pé ìwọ tó wà lẹ́sẹ̀ mi báyìí o ìwọ níbà máa pín sí lọ́la àti nínú pòpó àtọ́nàná abówókùn ọbárada gbogbo àwọn tọ́lọ yẹn pátá wọn bá máa forí balẹ̀ fún kò sọba kan tó máa jẹ nílẹ̀ Yorùbá lónìí tàbí òkè ìkùnrin tẹ̀ nífẹ̀ẹ́ kó máa ọ ni bí bàbá wọn ní ìjà àgbà gbogbo wọn rè ní ìnáwó gbàdé dáadáa jù náà lọ́dọ̀ ẹlẹ́sẹ̀ bàbá rẹ̀ mo lágbà ní ẹsẹ̀ bàbá ìlú pé ìwà ń gbọ́ ọkàn bí nǹkan àwọn alágbára action tí wọ́n ń dagun káàkiri lọ́jọ́ kọ́kọ́ tiẹ̀ jáde síta ẹni bá lágbájọ alágbájá kíní kan ọ̀la máa gbọ́ ọkọ̀ ẹ̀ ilé ìtọ́jú pé jẹ́jẹ́jẹ́ ló ń ṣe ọkọ̀ ilé orí mọ́ jáde mẹ́kàn máa bí Oòduà bímọ mẹ́kàn bímọ kan ọbí ọkàn bí ọ̀rọ̀ mìíràn táwọn ìṣe Oòduà ló bí bẹ́ẹ̀ ló bí ọkọ̀ kan náà ń bẹ́ àbí yìí bẹ́yẹn Oòduà ni gbogbo nǹkan tó ṣẹlẹ̀ ń gbà yẹn lọ́hùn náà ní símbọ̀ tá a fi síta ẹ̀ ẹnikẹ́ni tó bá rí tó bá fẹ́ béèrè ìtàn bí Oòduà ṣe rí àkọ́kọ́ wo símbọ̀ yẹn náà pé báwo ni nǹkan ṣe rí báwo ni nǹkan ṣe rí àwa ṣe lálàyé fún gẹ́gẹ́ bí tí mo ṣe bẹ̀rẹ̀ látàárọ̀ yẹn àfihàn bí àṣedálé ayé yìí bó ṣe jẹ́ bí ti bẹ̀rẹ̀ rẹ̀ kán bá wí ilé ayé hàn láwa kán bá wí ilé Ifẹ̀ rẹ̀ kán bá ilé Ifẹ̀ ilé Ifẹ̀ náà rẹ̀ ẹ̀ sọmọ Oòduà òjíṣẹ́ lòún jẹ́ wòlíì ni wòlíì aráyé rọrùn ọmọ àtọmọ náà gbé bá dáfá bá báyìí sọ̀rọ̀ ní ìsìn bá bèèrè ní ìsìn tó wà létò tí ì rí wọ́n máa túmọ̀ ẹ̀fọn ní gbogbo fá tó bá dá ǹjẹ́ bí wòlíì tá máa sọ fún pé nǹkan báyìí má ṣe ó ẹ̀wọ̀ báyìí náà kó má ṣe ó báyìí lé bẹ́ẹ̀ ló jẹ́ wòlíì ni ọmọ Oòduà ni gbogbo ohun tẹ́ ń pè ní lẹ́ẹ̀bínú ní Ọ̀rànmíyàn lọ́dàgún lọ gbogbo bẹ́yẹn lẹ́ẹ̀bínú náà sọ́dí lẹ́ẹ̀bínú náà sọ́dí Benin ni ìlú Bìnú sọ́dí Benin lónìí ni Ọ̀rànmíyàn lọ sí gbogbo yẹn pátápátá tí lọ sí Kọ́tọ́nú lọ sí nǹkan kan nítorí Ọ̀rànmíyàn ti ṣiṣẹ́ lọ nìyẹn ọmọ Oòduà àgbà kan lọ síbẹ̀ Ọ̀rànmíyàn lọ ní gbogbo ṣé lọ ní gbogbo yẹn lọ ìmọ̀ lọ́kọ̀ bàbá rẹ̀ ìjọba tá bá ti dákọ̀ ọmọ gbọ́dọ̀ ọkọ̀ bàbá náà síbẹ̀ ẹ̀kan lóye gbogbo àwọn tọ́jà ìlàjà bá ti ń gbọ́ pé ẹnìkan lọ́ọ̀tẹ́ ibì kan tó tọ́ láàfin síbẹ̀ ọmọ Oòduà ni pé ibi táwọn ti kúrò yìí o ààfin wà ń bẹ o àwọn dẹ́ máa ní ààfin bí bàbá wọn ṣe ní ààfin gbogbo ibi tí wọn kọ́ ààfin sí pátá ọmọ Oòduà ni wọn. ọdún Odùduwà la máa ń pè Odùduwà festival lẹ́yìn olóyìnbó máa ń pè àwọn ń pè ní ọdún Odùduwà ẹ̀yìn olóyìnbó ń pè ní Odùduwà festival la máa ń ṣe December so January. Nílẹ̀ bẹ́ẹ̀ náà map Africa kan tó jáde ńbẹ̀ wà ńbẹ̀ African map tó jáde ńlẹ̀ ńbẹ̀ fúnra ẹ̀ àwa kọ́lá yà ó àmọ́ ń gba tèmi ìlànà lọ́lọ́run lérò gbà tá ń wọlé ẹ̀rọ sàn fọ́ ọbẹ̀ jáde àwa rí i jáde dégbé yẹn bí la pè é tẹ́lẹ̀ rẹ̀ àmọ́ pé nǹkan kan ní apá amáṣílẹ̀ ńbẹ̀ map of Africa ọwà ńlẹ̀ ńbẹ̀ yìí àbílẹ̀ mọ̀ pé Ilé Ifẹ̀ orírun ayé ni.
Do you share same belief as narrated by Oba Ifarotimi or have a contrary view? Kindly share your thoughts in the comment section and don't forget to like, share and subscribe to our channels for more informative content like this. This is our discovery for today. See you next time.
Why you need to double-check who's lurking off the coast. The Barbary Corsairs didn't just steal gold, they stole people. And their legacy still echoes today. So, who exactly were the Barbary Moors? Picture a wild crew of North African Muslim pirates, merchants and soldiers, Berber, Arab, even some exiled Europeans thrown in for good measure. From Morocco to Libya they ruled the Mediterranean waves from the 1500s to the 1800s, capturing ships, raiding coastal towns and, here's the shocker, enslaving up to 1 million white Europeans for sale in North African markets. They were called Moors by terrified white Europeans, but really they were a mashup of cultures and motives, some fighting holy wars, others chasing pure profit. Backed by Ottoman power, they turned places like Algiers and Tunis into pirate HQs. These corsairs were so effective, some white coastal towns in Europe were abandoned for centuries. Their reign of terror finally ended when white European gained a little power, and yes, early white colonizers in the Americas fought back hard. And here's the twist. Before white Europeans sailed the seas, they were more likely to have their people enslaved in Africa and the Americas than the other way around. Now that's a plot twist you won't find in most history books. Let's get more into it. The sea is a cruel mistress, breathing fog onto Europe's coastlines, a shroud for the land. Out in the gloom, something worse than monsters waits men. The horizon is empty, then black sails appear, fast ships built for speed and terror. Xebecs and galleys slice through the waves like sharks. On the shores of Italy, Spain, even Iceland, people watch in dread. Fishermen pull in their nets, faces pale, church bells ring, not for prayer but as a warning. Fear tastes like salt and iron. The villagers know it well. They've heard stories from old men with haunted eyes, raids in the night, screams on the wind. The Barbary corsairs were pirates who dominated the Mediterranean and Caribbean for centuries, feared by sailors and coastal towns. They operated from the Barbary coast, modern Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, and Libya. The corsairs were a mix of Berbers, Arabs, and even Europeans, united by opportunity, not race or religion. Some Moorish Europeans like John Ward became infamous corsair leaders. Many corsairs were privateers, licensed to attack enemy ships, enriching their powerful city-states. The Barbary corsairs left a legacy of power, fear, and cultural fusion on the high seas. The Barbary corsairs are coming from Algiers, Tunis, Tripoli, not just pirates but white slavers. The prize they seek is you, your family, your entire village. Dread is a cold weight in the gut. Every creak, every shadow could be them. The night is their ally. They move under darkness, oars muffled, ghosts with cutlasses. The sound of their approach, a hull scraping sand, then the thunder of running feet. Doors splinter, torches flare, smoke and blood fill the air. This isn't a battle, it's a harvest. The crop is white human flesh, efficient, brutal, merciless, the nightmare that walked out of the sea. For centuries this terror shapes life on the Mediterranean coast. White people abandon the water, move inland, build walls, raise watchtowers, but the pirates are clever, patient, waiting for a lapse in vigilance. The black sails are a promised chains, loss, a life stolen and sold. This is the age of the Barbary Moors. The sea belongs to them. Every white coastal village lives in the shadow of those sails. The fear is constant, a legacy written in stone and memory. The nightmare is real and it comes from the sea. The Barbary corsairs' rise began after the fall of Muslim Spain in 1492. Expelled Moorish Muslims and Moorish Jews fled to North Africa, fueling a wave of piracy against Spain and its allies. These Morisco Moorish refugees, driven by revenge, launched daring raids using their knowledge of European coasts. The arrival of the Ottoman Empire in the 1500s transformed piracy into organized, state-sponsored warfare. Legendary leaders like the Barbarossa brothers turned Algiers into a pirate stronghold. Under Ottoman guidance, the Barbary states became powerful naval forces known as the Regencies. Piracy became big business, with fleets and fortified cities built on the profits of raiding. For centuries, the Barbary coast was a hub of relentless pirate activity, threatening all Mediterranean trade. The era of the Corsairs had truly begun. The Barbary Corsairs targeted merchant ships from Spain, Italy, France, and England, seeking valuable cargo and captives. Their fast galleys and later advanced sailing ships made them masters of surprise attacks. They didn't just strike at sea. White coastal towns across Europe lived in constant fear of sudden raids called razzias. Villages were plundered, homes burned, and entire communities taken captive. The most prized loot was white people, men, women, and children destined for the slave markets of North Africa and the America. White captives endured brutal marches and horrific sea journeys, with many dying before reaching the Barbary coast. Survivors faced a life of slavery, hard labor, or ransom. The threat of Corsair raids reshaped white European coastal life. Watchtowers rose, militias formed, and many fled inland. The fear was ever present. A single night could destroy a family or a village. The Corsairs' reach extended as far as Iceland, showing their audacity and skill. For generations, the Barbary Corsairs were a relentless force, shaping the lives and defenses of millions. Their raids left scars on the white European psyche and coastline. The Mediterranean was a sea of danger, ruled by the Corsairs' swift ships and ruthless ambition. The Barbary slave trade was a massive, often overlooked chapter in history. Millions of white Europeans were captured and enslaved between the 1500s and the late 1800s. Corsairs targeted sailors, villagers, and travelers, anyone unlucky enough to cross their path. White captives were sold in bustling slave markets in Algiers, Tunis, and Tripoli. White men faced brutal labor, rowing galleys, building fortifications, or toiling in quarries. White women became domestic servants or entered the harems of the elite. Some white slaves converted to Islam, gaining freedom and sometimes power as Corsair captains. Others relied on ransom, with families and religious orders in white Europe raising huge sums for their release. Organizations like the Trinitarians and Mercedarians dedicated themselves to freeing captives. The hope of rescue was slim, and many never saw home again. The white slave trade was the economic backbone of the Barbary states. The suffering and fear it caused echoed across white Europe for centuries. The Barbary slave trade remains a stark reminder of the human cost of piracy and power. This was a business, a ruthless, cold enterprise. The Barbary pirates weren't just thugs, they were entrepreneurs of human misery. Their product? People, specifically white Europeans. White booty was more valuable than gold or spice. A strong man could row a galley, a skilled craftsman could serve a pasha, a beautiful white woman could fetch a king's ransom. Every white captive was currency, a price tag, not a person. In Algiers and Tunis, pale-skinned captives were status symbols, a novelty, a luxury. The Corsairs were expert appraisers, inspecting hands, teeth, muscles, like livestock at auction. No malice, just the cold gaze of a Moorish merchant. The system was state-sponsored, rulers took a cut of every prize. Piracy was the engine of their economy, funding armies, palaces, harems. Captains like Barbarossa and Murat Reis were legends, national heroes built on stolen lives. When black sails appeared, it wasn't personal, it was business. The pirates weren't driven by hate, but by the market. They fulfilled orders, galley slaves, cooks, servants. The coasts of white Europe were their supermarket. The shoppers waited in Barbary. The human cost was irrelevant. Profit was king. The business of white booty was booming. Every raid was a transaction. Every white captive a commodity. The suffering was just a line on a ledger, and the market never slept. The Corsair was a hunter, a predator who perfected the ambush. It wasn't about a fair fight. It was about winning by any means. Deception was their favorite weapon, a friendly flag, a sudden switch, chaos unleashed. Their ships, xebecs and galleys, were the sports cars of the sea, fast and agile. They could hug the coast, hide in coves, outrun and outmaneuver their prey. When the wind died, oars drove them forward, inescapable doom. Attacks on villages were military operations. Scouts mapped the town, escape routes sealed. The assault came from all sides, beach diversions, hidden ambushers. White villagers ran from chaos, only to be trapped by more corsairs. It was a perfectly executed trap. The attack was a storm of noise and fire, gunshots, war cries, torches on roofs. White villagers, disoriented and terrified, were quickly rounded up. The pirates moved with brutal efficiency, binding hands, herding captives, in and out before any defense could form. By the time help arrived, the corsairs and their human cargo were gone. The sea swallowed the evidence. The art of the ambush was their signature. No mercy, no warning, no escape. The only certainty was fear. The pirates vanished as quickly as they came. The white villages was left in ruins. The lesson, nowhere was safe. Being captured was just the beginning. The journey to North Africa, North America, and the island was a nightmare. White captives crammed below deck, air thick with fear and sickness. The weak died, only the strong survived. In Algiers or Tunis, white captives were paraded through jeering crowds, a living trophy. At the slave market, auctioneers shouted out qualities, buyers inspected white captives like livestock. Families were torn apart without hesitation. Men rode galleys until death. Skilled workers served masters. Women faced the grimmest fate in harems. Life depended on an owner's whim. Freedom was a distant hope. For most, the auction block was the start of endless servitude. The spectacle was public, the suffering private. The market thrived on human misery. Ransom was the pirates' other business, hostages as investments. A common sailor fetched little, a nobleman, a fortune. The process was theater white captives wrote desperate letters home. White families sold everything. Religious orders begged for donations. Negotiations were absurd. Pirates demanded fortunes. Monks pleaded poverty. Haggling dragged on for weeks. Pirates played games, threatening executions, raising prices, sometimes recapturing ransomed victims. It was extortion with contracts and negotiators. A whole economy built on human desperation. The system was cruel, cynical, and bizarrely formal. Ransom was just another line of business. The suffering was real, the bureaucracy relentless. For some, ransom meant hope. For most, it was a cruel joke. The pirates always got paid. The cycle never ended. White European women captured by Barbary corsairs faced the brutal reality of the slave trade. Their treatment varied depending on who purchased them, but the outcomes ranged from domestic servitude, prostitutes, and concubinage to harsh labor and a life of confinement. Upon arrival in North African cities like Algiers, captives were paraded, chained, and nearly naked for inspection before being sold at auction. Families were often separated, with husbands, wives, and children sold to different buyers. Captives were segregated by sex, with women often sold into domestic servitude or harems. A prospective buyer might pay a higher price for a young, beautiful, or educated white woman. Many white women, particularly those taken by rulers like sultans, were forced into concubinage or confined to harems. While some could become powerful within the harem system, many lived out their days in captivity. A harem is a domestic space that is reserved for the women of the house in a Muslim family. A harem may house a man's wife or wives, their prepubescent male children, unmarried daughters, female domestic servants, and other unmarried female relatives. Other women became household servants for private parties. Their living conditions could vary widely, with some being treated as virtual companions, while others were subject to hard work and beatings if they failed to meet demands. Captive white women, especially those traveling alone, were constantly aware of the threat of sexual violence. This created a severe gendered double standard where a captured white woman was often viewed by her home culture as having lost her chastity simply by virtue of her captivity. Although some captives could gain freedom by converting to Islam, this was not a guaranteed outcome. A captive's fate remained largely at the discretion of their owner. Many captives died during the voyage to North Africa, North America, and the islands due to disease, lack of food, and poor conditions. For the wealthy, release could be secured through ransom. However, poor white captives were condemned to slavery unless they converted or were freed. For the few who did manage to return, the transition was challenging. Captivity narratives such as those by Elizabeth Marsh document the difficult realities and the societal scrutiny faced by white female former captives. Some raids became legend, full-blown invasions, not just snatches. In 1627, Murat Reis sailed to Iceland, sacking towns and carrying off hundreds into slavery. An Icelandic pastor's wife sold in Algiers. Imagine that journey. In 1631, Baltimore, Ireland, was wiped out in a single night. Over 100 people vanished. The Italian coast suffered too. Ischia lost thousands to Barbarossa in 1544. Gozo, Malta, was emptied by Dragut in 1551, almost the entire population enslaved. These were demographic catastrophes, not just raids. Captains like Barbarossa, Dragut, and Murat Reis were strategists and rulers, not mere criminals. Barbarossa became High Admiral for the Ottoman Sultan, feared from Gibraltar to Venice. Their empires were built on the slave trade's brutal efficiency. Their names inspired terror and awe across Europe. These were architects of an era of fear. Their stories became warnings. No coast was safe. The scale was staggering, the ruthlessness unmatched. Legends grew with every raid. The world watched, helpless. The Corsairs' legacy was written in blood and loss. Their era shaped the map and the nightmares of Europe. Centuries of terror reshaped white southern Europe. White coastlines emptied. White villages became ghost towns. White people fled inland, building homes on hills behind walls. The sea became a source of death, not life. The trauma was cultural, ancestral. Historians estimate up to millions of white Europeans enslaved over 3 centuries. For every captive, dozens grieved, families shattered, children orphaned. White women beauty was a curse. Noble women were prized for harems, their stories lost to history. White Europe built fortresses, watchtowers, and signal networks, smoke by day, fire by night. It was a permanent state of war, a simmering conflict. The Barbary Corsairs held white Europe hostage, creating a frontier of fear. The scars remain, etched in stone and memory. The coastline became a graveyard of hope. Here's the twist. Many whites captured by Barbary pirates or fleeing convict systems ended up in America. They knew chains, the lash, the horror of being property. But in the New World they sought power, not empathy. They encountered Native Americans and people of Moorish descent, cultures with their own histories. The newcomers needed someone beneath them to survive. They flipped the script, projecting their trauma onto others, using the system to oppress. Laws reclassified Moors and Indians as colored or black, erasing identities and rights. The term white, once a mark of value in Algiers, became a badge of power in America. The victims became perpetrators, creating a new class of slaves. It was self-preservation by oppression. The irony is staggering. The enslaved became masters. The cycle of suffering continued, just with new victims. History's darkest lessons repeated. No empire lasts forever, not even one of pirates. By the 1800s, Europe and the new United States were done paying tribute. Their navies grew stronger, the old games were ending, the U.S. pushed back first. Jefferson refused Tripoli's demands, sparking the First Barbary War. The U.S. Navy fought back, making a statement. The days of easy money were over. Europe followed. After the Napoleonic Wars, their fleets were unmatched. Keep in mind, Britain was ran by Moor up until 1836. In 1816, a white British Dutch backed by British Moor's fleet bombarded Algiers, demanding the release of all white Christian slaves. The Dey refused, the city was shattered, the Corsair fleet destroyed. The Barbary state's power was broken. In 1830, France invaded Algiers, ending its Corsair era for good. One by one, the Barbary states fell under European control. The reign of the pirates, 3 centuries long, was over. The black sails of fear were torn down. The sea became a little less cruel. The nightmare finally ended. So, the question becomes, what did the Corsairs Moors do with all that booty they collected? Well, the Barbary Moors, also known as Corsairs, used the booty they collected from raiding white European ships and white coastal towns to enrich themselves, fund their states, and fuel the ongoing piracy and slave trade. Their operations were a significant economic driver for the semi-independent states of the Barbary Coast in North Africa, which nominally fell under Ottoman rule. This was often the most valuable part of the booty. Captives with wealthy families or governments were held for ransom. Those who could not pay their ransom were sold into slavery in markets across North Africa. Rulers of the Barbary states, such as the Pasha, had the right to claim a portion of the captured slaves for their own use. Enslaved white people were often used for hard manual labor, with some forced to row the Corsair galleys. The Barbary Corsairs plundered the cargo of merchant ships, which included valuable goods. The goods were sold and the profits were distributed among the Corsair captains and crew. A portion of the profits was given to the state that sponsored the Corsairs' activities, filling state coffers. The Corsairs often kept the white captured ships to add to their own fleet. The Barbary states used the revenue from piracy and the slave trade to fund their militaries and governments, including the construction of public buildings. The practice also allowed the Barbary states to collect tribute payments from more powerful white European nations. These payments were made to ensure the pirates would not attack the paying nation's merchant ships, the Barbary piracy business model. Rather than being disorganized outlaws, Barbary piracy was often a state-sponsored enterprise. The governments of Algiers, Tunis, and Tripoli hired captains known as Rais to raid foreign vessels. In exchange for a share of the profits, the Corsairs were allowed to keep the rest of the white people's ship, cargo, and crew. This system provided wealth and power to the Corsairs, and was a significant officially sanctioned source of income for the Barbary states. For centuries, white European nations tried to contain the Barbary Corsairs with treaties, tribute, and occasional military strikes. These efforts rarely lasted. The Corsairs always returned. The late 1700s brought a new player, the United States, whose ships soon fell prey to Barbary piracy. After paying tribute failed, the U.S. launched the First and Second Barbary Wars, proving that force could work. The real turning point came after the Napoleonic Wars, when white European powers united against the Corsairs. In 1816, a massive Anglo-Dutch fleet devastated Algiers, forcing the release of thousands of slaves and ending European enslavement. The Barbary states quickly lost their power and independence. The French conquest of Algeria in 1830 dismantled the last Corsair stronghold. The Mediterranean became safe for trade, and the era of the Barbary Corsairs ended. Their legacy lives on in legend, but their reign of terror was over. The Barbary Corsairs remain a powerful symbol of piracy, resistance, and the shifting tides of history. Their story is a reminder of how empires rise and fall on the waves of the sea.
Please, allow me to show you something.
They say I'm crazy and that might be true. I got this white in my DNA, yet I'm coming for you. It's time we turn the tables, flip these motherfuckers on you. I wanna see you hanging from trees. It's time you pay for your dirt and your showtime. You created the monster, you created the beast. Now all this savagery you just gon' reap. I'm coming home, daddy, to the plantation, and I'm taking the lives of everybody, including the children, on some Nat Turner. Do you hear that sound? It's about to go down. Unleash the beast, we about to tear this motherfucker down. Do you hear that sound? It's about to go down. Unleash the beast, we about to tear this motherfucker down. I met my girl Harriet at the gate. If you wanna know how she doing, yeah, she straight. But she had one question: when we gon' get up? All that talking tough, yeah, we don't walk it tough. She got it locked and loaded, got that piece up on her side. She looked me in my eyes and said, "Mitch, you ready to ride?" Moving forward, you gotta use both eyes. Watch your front and watch your back. Keep your hands up on your gas. Do you hear that sound? It's about to go down. Unleash the beast, we about to tear this motherfucker down. Do you hear that sound? It's about to go down. Unleash the beast, we about to tear this motherfucker down. He sit at the table, but he don't order no bacon. He greet me in those words, assalamu alaikum. Got them glasses on his face and them waves in his head. He go by the name of Detroit Red. He looks me in my eye and says you only get one try. Know that your biggest opposition will come from the inside. I know you wanna love them all, but don't even try, because they'll smile up in your face while plotting your demise. Do you hear that sound? It's about to go down. Unleash the beast, we about to tear this motherfucker down. Do you hear that sound? It's about to go down. Unleash the beast, we about to tear this motherfucker down. We are the children of the ancestors that weren't part of it.